it's been a kind of a rocky road to get today off the ground, but thanks to a lot of people, namely Judith Hunter, Babs, Barbara Valentino, Ruth Ann, and a host of others, we were able to make some lemonade out of some lemons that fell to our feet in the process. I myself was planning to be there, then had to go to a medical appointment for a trip to Brazil. And then that got canceled at the last minute, as well as my husband finding out that his tennis partner came down with COVID yesterday. So in any event, the best laid plans, but we've been able to work things out and bring you a wonderful presentation. And as Barbara Garlock's personal situation shifted into high gear with her mother going to hospice, we now have Yiling, who has graciously agreed at the last minute to come and speak on her behalf and the topic of Quilts4DC statehood. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Babs, who will introduce Yiling, and we'll sit back and enjoy a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd also like to acknowledge you for helping coordinate all the different parts of the last 24 to 48 hours. A year and a half ago, my husband and I attended a play at the Arena Stage, actually July 23rd, 2022. And this was to see a musical by Frederick Douglass. Can you imagine a musical? But it was his words, and it was a play called American Prophet. It was outstanding. But if you've been to the Arena Stage, you will notice that sometimes they have displays in their lobby. And what I saw were beautiful, beautiful quilts, a whole variety of quilts. And there were this number 51 kept coming up. And I'm saying, what's the significance of 51? What is this? What is it? But I was so taken in with the craft and the handiwork that after the play, I went over and I said, is there someone here I can ask about this? And I said, yes, there's a table over there with people from the League of Women Voters. So I went over there and I said, and I asked, and of course they thought I was wanting to become active in the League of Women Voters. What I wanted to know was, tell me more about the quilts. Tell me about these. They were so fantastic. So I left my name and number, and a little bit later, someone from League of Women Voters contacted me. And then she said, no, who you need to speak with is Barbara Garlock. And Barbara Garlock is I called her and she said, oh, yes. And she started explaining this to me. And then I said, well, do you ever do a presentation about something like this? She says, oh, I could. Why don't I give you some links for you to go look at what I've done in the past? So I went on and I looked at these and my mouth dropped at how outstanding it was and how her presentation was so wonderful. So I said to her, this was about a year and a half ago, I said, or a year ago, we are booked this year. Would you be interested and available sometime in the future, like our next program in 22, 23, 24? And she said, yes, whenever you want. So I said, I'll be in touch. So this summer, when I met with my committee, she was someone who was on my list to contact again to see if she was available. And I did, and she was. And she was flexible about when. She was so open. It was so wonderful. So, and we've been in contact. And then in the last 2 weeks, she wrote me and said, I'm going to be in January for most of the month and won't be have to. But she said, in New York. Thank you, Rob. She said, however, I've got a remarkable woman to take my place at this. I've arranged for Yilin Zhang, And she's a colleague of hers from the League of Women Voters. And so she's willing to carry on for me at the January 16th meeting. I'm going to first read what she wrote about Yilin. Yilin is a remarkable woman, a real up-and-coming rock star in my estimation, who is an experienced business executive and community activist. In both her professional and volunteer advocacy work, Yilin has presented to groups across the country and on a variety of media outlets. She is a real pro. I know she will be an exciting and interesting speaker.
Oh, okay, so here she is.
Yilin, I hear someone talking. Is there?
Yeah, we're just signing in at the restaurant. Sorry.
Oh, well,
We're trying to sign in.
okay. Well, Yilin, you get to hear your praises over again. Judith, let us know when you're signed in.
I just muted her since it's background noise.
Okay. Do you think that she can hear us?
Yes, I just muted her, that's all. I can ask her to unmute later.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So she can see, can she see the people?
It depends on how she has her settings on. She should be able to, that's the whole point. Babs, I think you've been muted somehow.
There. How's
Okay,
that?
better.
Okay. Hello, people. I'm going to start this again so people at the restaurant can hear this. Okay. Barbara Garlock had to bow out for this event because of needing to be with her mother in the month of January. But she stepped up like a professional and said, I've got someone else for you. And she's an excellent colleague from the League of Women Voters, and she will carry on with this presentation on January 16th. Yilin is a remarkable woman, a real up-and-coming rock star in my estimation, who is an experienced business executive and community activist. In both her professional and volunteer advocacy work, Yilin has presented to groups across the country and on a variety of media outlets. She is a real pro. I know she will be exciting and an interesting speaker. She's attached her bio, which I have read, and I can see why she is impressed with Yilin. Yilin is a community activist, business executive, and longtime DC resident. She is the principal strategist at Yilin Zhang Advisory, which provides advisory services in political strategy and campaign management, nonprofit fundraising, strategic planning, communications, and special events planning. She was formerly a business development executive with Kaiser Permanente and consulted for the Veterans Health Administration. She has her bachelor's in anthropology from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, a master's degree in health policy and economics from the London School of Economics, and was awarded a Fulbright Fellowship for research in the Department of Health Economics at Fudan University in Shanghai. She has a certificate from the campaign school at Yale. In 2020, Ms. Zhang was a candidate for DC Council to represent Ward 2. Ms. Zhang is active with the League of Women Voters of the District of Columbia, DC, a nonpartisan 103-year-old organization dedicated to empowering voters and defending democracy. She also manages the League's work for advocating for full representation for the 700,000 residents of DC. In that role, she has made presentations to organizations throughout the country on issues of voting rights and fair elections. I didn't want to edit any of this because it is so impressive. And I also want to say how flexible Yilin was during the last 24 hours as we dealt with being at the restaurant, covering our expenses there, taking care of the safety of our members, taking care of so many things, and thanking the people who have organized this. I'd like to say thank you for everybody who saw that we could operate in this way, and everybody gets something very positive out of the way we coordinated this particular meeting. It was really very impressive. And then, speaking of impressive, it's now time, Yilin, after all this, to turn over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Babs. And thank you for working with me to pull this together in a different fashion at the last minute due to the snow. I hope that next time we can all meet in person, but I am originally from Michigan, so this amount of snow is not too bad for me. And I want to thank Paula for her leadership with this fantastic organization. Thank you to Ruth Ann for working with me to make this possible today. And thank you to all of you who have tuned in virtually and from the restaurant. So yes, I am taking Barbara Garlock's place today. She very much hoped to be here with you today, but as Babs mentioned, she's needing to be in New York City. But I have a great story about Barlock. She's really just a fantastic, energetic person who injected a lot of energy into this project, Quilts and Advocacy. And she was the one who started it with the League of Women Voters. And when she and I first met a couple years ago, we were actually pulling together these boxes that we were putting together because we were going to go in front of the Capitol to deliver 37,000 signatures in support of statehood. And these are signatures that we collected from folks across the country. So it was a really special day, but also just with the League of Women Voters, being able to work side by side with your colleagues for a very important goal that's really special. And so she's a very special person and a friend of mine. And I am just grateful to be able to be here with you today and to represent the League of Women Voters. So today's presentation, I'm going to go through some slides. I'm not going to necessarily read through all the slides, but I'm going to give you a flavor of the issue of DC statehood and then talk about the quilts and advocacy, so artistic activism and advocacy. And then throughout the presentation, if you have questions, please feel free to either put it in the chat box, which I will be able to check periodically, or raise your hand. And then I think Ruth Ann will help me track who is raising their hand because I prefer to be able to take questions throughout the presentation. And of course, we'll do a Q&A at the end. So just keep that in mind. So quilts and advocacy. Let me see if I can move to the next slide. As I mentioned, I'm going to go through DC statehood a little bit, just the issue. And in the chat box, if you'd like to let me know, do you live in DC or do you live outside of DC? I'd just like to get a sense of who lives in DC or who has lived in DC, and maybe even answer if statehood is something that you have thought about. What's your understanding around statehood? So feel free to put that in the chat box. And then I'll go through examples of where we've used quilts and advocacy. Babs mentioned seeing the beautiful quilts at Arena Stage when the American Prophet was playing. So we've done a ton of things, or Barbara has led that throughout the community and across DC. So I'm going to share examples about that. And then lastly, a call to action, which is, how can you be involved if you'd like to be involved in these types of projects? So just a little bit about the League of Women Voters, which I'm sure many of you already know, but the League of Women Voters is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that started more than a century ago. And it's really about removing barriers so that everyone can participate equally in our democracy. And with the DC statehood issue, the League of Women Voters started fighting for this very early on, since 1938. So the League of Women Voters has been at the forefront of these conversations for some time. And just a little bit about DC. So when I go and give presentations about DC statehood across the country to different audiences, really all different demographics, a common question that I get and my team gets is, well, does anyone actually live in DC? I mean, we thought that people just went to DC to work and then they left at the end of the day. But DC has around approximately 700,000, give or take a few thousand residents. And we have a larger population than the states of Vermont and Wyoming. So some people say, you don't have people who live here, but clearly we do. And we have very distinct and unique neighborhoods. And people are born here, they make their careers here, they retire here, they raise their families here. So as someone who I've lived in DC for close to 14 years now, and originally moved from Michigan, but I do consider DC my home now. And I know it's my home because whenever I travel somewhere else, I want to return to DC. And I think DC is just one of the most beautiful cities in the world. And I myself live in Logan Circle, and I just think it's one of the most beautiful neighborhoods in the world also. So this shows you this map right here, and I'm not sure if you can see my arrow, but you can see the map of DC. And then where there's some arrows pointing to the white section, that is the federal district. So when we become a state, that portion still remains the federal district. And then the surrounding areas, that's what becomes the state. Okay. So we're going to get into some timelines here. So I won't read this in too much detail, but really the point that this is trying to make is that throughout the last couple centuries and more, there's been so much change with DC, with retrocession and abolishing the local government. And just so DC has had a lot of shifts and changes related to its political structure and the actual physical landscape. And this is, I think, quite unique to see, because this shows that even since 1961, that's still relatively recent. That the 23rd Amendment that was passed in 1961, that's what allowed DC residents to be able to vote for a president starting in 1964. So we're talking about relatively recent history. And then so on and so forth. So now we've morphed, we have our non-voting delegate, and that currently is Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton. And we also have of course, a mayor and a DC council, and it's a 13-member council. Okay, so why do we want DC statehood? The fact of the matter is that we don't have voting representation at the highest levels of government. So say, for example, before we started the call, I was speaking with Ruth Ann, and she mentioned that she lives in Arizona. Well, she has access to her leaders in the Senate and the House. You know, she can call up their offices if there's an issue. And so for us, of course, we have in DC, we have the council and we have Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, but she doesn't have voting power on the final passage of a bill. So while she is really a rock star in terms of fighting for our rights, legislatively, we just don't have that power. We don't have that political voice. So we are really, we are lacking in, we don't have our 2 senators, and we don't have the representatives we have a non-voting delegate, so we don't have a representative truly in the House of Representatives. So how does that impact us? That impacts us because when the DC Council tries to pass a bill, push it into legislation, it ultimately needs to be reviewed by Congress over a period of time. And then also when we go through our budget, that ultimately needs to be reviewed by Congress. So everything needs to go through review through Congress. And why that matters is because we elect our council members, but we want people who can represent our views and opinions and our beliefs. And unfortunately, right now, we just don't have that. And so Congress can sometimes see DC as a petri dish where it tries to test out different things. And we just don't want that anymore because we live in DC, we love DC, and we want to be represented by people that we elect into office. So in earlier, Babs had mentioned that, you know, I go around and members of my team, we go around the country and we give presentations to folks around the country. And the real challenge is that people just don't really, either they don't know about DC statehood, the issue, they haven't thought about it, or they don't understand why it is important. And it's not even just people outside of DC, even within DC. I started in the DC statehood movement a little over 7 years ago. And I remember I just wanted to be involved and I became very interested in the issue. But prior to that, I hadn't really thought about DC statehood. So that's I think it's just a lot of the lack of awareness, and also sometimes even when you know, it can become maybe an issue that you're apathetic about because you don't see it as directly impacting your day-to-day. But in states of an emergency, you can clearly see where it might impact us. So for example, with the pandemic, DC was treated like a territory, and consequently, we didn't get the COVID relief package in the beginning, and we were shortchanged $350 million. Ultimately, that was resolved, but just these things that happen when you really need a different solution, that's when you really feel the impact of not having DC statehood, because it truly is a foundational issue that impacts all of our lives, in whether in direct or indirect ways. So I love this map. This just shows the variety in DC, all the beautiful neighborhoods. And we use this because we try to share with our audience just how diverse, how robust, and how lively DC is. There's so much going on, and one of the reasons why I love being involved in the community is because you really get to build the relationships with people, and it feels truly like a home. And I just want DC to continue to grow and be a better place every day. And I think it's just a fantastic place to live. But, you know, we have people who serve in the military. We have 19 colleges and universities. We have 131 neighborhoods. So DC is really, it can really stand on its own 2 feet, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be a state. So again, why DC statehood? Expanding our democracy, allowing people to have a voice at the highest levels of our government, and to make sure that we have full rights, because the United Nations also did say that the fact that DC does not have a statehood is a violation of human rights. And DC, there's no other democratic country, a capital of a democratic country, that doesn't have a voice at the highest levels of government, and DC is the one that doesn't. So that's something that we need to change. Okay, let me pause right here before I move into the quilts and our exhibitions and the beautiful photos. Do I have any questions? And I'm gonna check the chat box. Yes,
Okay. Can I ask a question?
please.
Can you? Yeah, first of all, that map was fantastic, because whenever they say this restaurant is here, I have no idea what they're talking about. So I want to find out how I can get this.
Okay, I can send it to you.
Okay, great, great. I think you're so right. It's not just living outside the DMV area, because since we've come back from overseas, this new term, District, Maryland, and Virginia, has come into use. And as a result, I think that we in Maryland and Virginia become so much more aware that we are part of this area. It's not just our state or our district, that we are very much connected. And like even today, our weather was pulling us all together. So I had so many questions. So just to say thank you for enlightening me, and I am assuming other people too who may not have put this all together. So anyway, I guess that's more of a statement than a question. But anyway, thank you. And I
Yeah.
love the way you do it so balanced and so calmly, that this is you're putting out the facts, and it makes so much sense.
Thank you,
So,
Bab. Well, great. If we have any more questions, please feel free to put it in the chat box or raise your hand, and then I will try to get to it. But let's move into the exciting portion, which is really a passion project that Barbara Garlock started with the League of Women Voters. And it's been going on really for the last couple years. And we've had tremendous success with getting these beautiful quilts from people from across the country. And then we had an auction last year, and it was incredibly successful. But I'm going to get into that in just a couple of slides. But so let's start with why we did quilts and advocacy. Quilts is a perfect medium for advocacy. I mean, I was shocked when I learned from Barbara that there are about 10 million or more quilters. Yeah. And I had limited understanding of quilts before Barbara started this project. But when I saw these quilts, these are truly works of art. I mean, they belong in museums, and they're just gorgeous. And I'll show some photos in a minute. But there's a large quilt network. And so Barbara thought that this would be the perfect medium to share DC statehood and really reach audiences that maybe we haven't reached before, and also make this fun and accessible for people. So this is just an example of quilts where it's been used in the past for political purposes. And I won't necessarily read through this, but we're just basically trying to show that there is a pattern from the past that quilts has really been used successfully to push and move things forward. And here's a couple more examples. And as you can see, these quilts are, again, truly works of art. And like, for example, this one on the left was part of the Smithsonian collection. So we were just very lucky to get so many talented quilters to donate their time and donate their quilts to us. And this is very small print, so it's not meant for you to be able to read, but this is the quilt challenge that Barbara Garlock put together. And she really created this, and she did a lot of marketing on social media. She reached out to her network, to her quilting network, and just put this opportunity forward. And really the ask was to get these talented quilters to quilt something about statehood. So what does DC statehood mean to them? So when they think about DC becoming the 51st state, what's the imagery that comes to mind? And so everyone, of course, had a very different and creative and beautiful approach. But we just had so much interest, and people were excited to share their work. So here, I hope you can see on the screen, here are some examples of the quilts that we received. And I can share this link maybe with Babs later, and she can share with the group. But we have a link online that had the more than 60 quilts that we received. And, originally the goal was to get 51, but we had so much interest and people sent in their quilts, and we took these beautiful photos of the quilts and we put it on the League of Women Voters DC website for everyone to see. And there was a little story underneath some of them to share what was the inspiration behind these quilts. And as you can tell, everyone has something different that comes to mind. And I think I may have a few more, but these quilts came from quilters, as you can see, from 15 different states and DC. And here's some more quilts. So I absolutely love the one in the middle here. And of course, I love the one on the left. I think they're cherry blossoms, and really all of these, but some of them were just so colorful and really eye-catching. And it really makes I think it opens up the conversation about statehood with maybe people who haven't thought about the issue. And it just makes it really easy to talk about statehood. Because one of the things that we do want to do, I think the League of Women Voters is truly the best at educating people about issues and making it easy to understand and accessible. But at the same time, we want to make it fun, because I think, you don't want to be a part of something if it's not enjoyable, right? So we were really lucky to get these quilts. And now I'm going to move into just examples of where these quilts have been displayed before we put them up for auction. So this is over the course of the last year, but we had a lot of in-person exhibits. This was at the Dumbarton United Methodist Church in Georgetown. We set up the quilts. And I believe this was at an event where I think Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton was speaking. So we set it up around the church, and we were really lucky to be able to do that. And people saw these beautiful quilts. On the bottom here, you'll see Barbara in kind of like the yellow right here, standing next to the quilts. And this one is just a segue into another exhibit that we had that Babs mentioned that occurred at Arena Stage. And they were showing a play, American Prophet, over several weeks. And they invited us to put a display of the quilts all around the theater, and it was just gorgeous. So you can see here, I think maybe it might be the next slide, but here's some more displays of the quilts. And actually right here, I think this is Leanne. She's based in Kansas, and she did some quilts for us. And so when we were in Denver for the National League of Women Voters US convention, she was able to come and then see her quilt displayed. So that was really wonderful. But here is the picture of arena stage. So as you can see, we put them all along the alcove area, and it was just it really brightened up the theater, and I think it added an extra element to it. And here you'll see we always have our League of Women Voters table. We provide information about all of the different programs that we do. For example, a well-known one is Vote 411, and it's basically it's a tool, a platform that you can go on to. You can type in your address and your zip code, and you will find out who is going to be running for office in your area at all levels. And the league actually sends out these questionnaires to candidates. Because I myself have filled it out before, sends out these questionnaires to candidates, and you answer these questions, and then they post it on the website. And so you could see the responses from candidates. So it's really a fantastic tool. And of course, we register voters. These days, we are really trying to do a big push on engaging with youth voters. And of course, DC Statehood, we have a very full committee. We have what we call our DC Statehood and Full Rights Committee, and we do things like presentations in DC and across the country. And we partake in coalition building. We go on Capitol Hill for a Capitol Hill visit day to talk to elected leaders about statehood across both parties. And it's just a lot of different things that we do. And quilts and advocacy is really it's the artistic activism branch of our work. So here you can see Barbara here on the left. And then I want to do a special shout out to right here on the bottom right, Ann Anderson, who has been just an amazing leader who I'm lucky to work with. She's been involved in the statehood movement for more than half a century. And she's just a walking encyclopedia about DC statehood. So we really have an amazing team, and we do all different sorts of things, but together we really work well together. So here is another exhibit. We did displays really across DC, across the different wards. And some of you may know DC is broken into 8 wards. And this exhibit was at the Arc. And we displayed, we had a special room. They allowed us a special room for the gallery, and they're also a theater, and they're also a community center for the community. And it was just really fantastic to see people from across DC and beyond come to this exhibit. So this was one of our other successful exhibits. And because Barbara Garlock is just so amazing, she really did not only social media outreach, but she also did a lot of interviews with local media outlets. And so these are some examples of what she did. And I was lucky to be able to do a podcast conversation with her on the Tommy McFly show, and we talked about statehood. So really generating a lot of interest through social media outlets, and just word of mouth. So this is something that we don't always typically do this, but due to the success and the interest around the quilts, Barbara created these postcards, and so they're very, very nice. And I don't know if we have any left, but I can check if people are interested. But we were selling them to raise money for the League of Women Voters, and they're just really nice postcards that you can send to your friends and family across the country, and that jumpstarts the conversation about statehood. Okay, so now sadly, moving into the portion where we auctioned off the quilts, but it was an online auction, and some of the bids got quite competitive. So there were some that were obviously very sought after. I definitely had my favorites, but these are pictures of the individuals who were successful in their bid. and consequently they got these quilts. And I do want to give a big shout out to all the quilters, because they essentially donated their quilt. You know, they did not have to. They spent a lot of time and energy creating such beautiful works of art, and they donated it to the league. And we were successful, and we raised about $8,000 through auctioning off these quilts. Okay, let me stop right there and just see if there's any questions about the quilts specifically. And I'm going to check the chat box. Okay. All right, well, seeing no questions, I'm just going to move into this portion, and then we'll be closing out quite soon, and I'll take more questions at the end. So this is a section about examples of art projects. So where do we go from here? So we had quilts, and you know, what else can we do? And there's so many things that can be done. For example, last year we actually did, it's not in the slides, but we did an activity called yarn bombing. I don't know if anyone has heard of this concept of yarn bombing, but essentially it's knitting and crocheting. And instead of putting graffiti on buildings, on public buildings, you knit something or you crochet something and you put it on the building, of course, with permission. But this is really awesome because you can do something creative, and then, you know, it's not permanent on the building. It's, and you can always, you know, take it down, but you can put these things anywhere. Some people might, if it's allowed, like on a tree or a bench. But they're also really, if you Google it, really amazing and beautiful works of art. But this slide is an example of another project that another leaguer that I work with, who's on the board, that she was doing. It's called Apollo 51. And we were part of a group with the Center of Artistic Activism. And basically it was trying to kind of capture the essence and the spirit of statehood. And unfortunately, I can't talk too specifically about it, but it's another example about, you know, how we've used art to channel as a medium for advocacy. And this is another example, an organization that we work with. It's called DC Vote, and like the League of Women Voters, and then there's multiple other organizations that also work in statehood, and all of us are part of a coalition. DC Vote is one of those organizations that has been fighting very strongly for statehood also. And this is an example of a community canvas where people could come together and color the canvas, and again, also draw something, what statehood, in terms of what statehood means for them. And this is an Instagram snippet. And again, it's showing how we're using social media, or how they're using social media to spread the word about statehood. So really, this is more the call to action. I'm sure many of you, or some of you, have a passion for art and have many different talents. So if you'd like to apply it to advocacy or something else, it's very much possible. And these are just some questions that Barbara put together to help you think through what you can do if you want to use your talent in art as a medium for advocacy. So what kinds of questions do you want to ask? So, you know, what do you want to target? Who do you want to engage? Who will participate? Where will it be shown? And of course, most importantly, will it be fun for all those involved? So these are just some questions. And this is a quilt on the right-hand side with our deer pandas that unfortunately are not there anymore, but it's a beautiful quilt. So this, again, this is not meant for you to, I know the print is a bit small, but this, I believe Barbara was really just trying to show that you can align your art and your advocacy interests with some sort of holiday or meaningful cultural event. So you can use those dates as markers and ideas. And this is another quilt. So end taxation without representation. And then here's another quilt. And yeah, and that wraps up the presentation. So you'll see the contact information for Barbara, and then also for myself. I'm happy to send it to anyone who would like it after the presentation. But the website is there for you to view at any time. We are also on Twitter, we are on Instagram and Facebook, so you can easily, I think you should be able to hopefully find us easily. And then this picture right here is when we were at the Palisades 4th of July parade last year, and I'm kind of peeking in from the back. You can just see the top of my head with sunglasses. That's me. That's me right there. I was actually there. So, but yeah, we are just a really fantastic group of people, and I'm sorry that you can't meet more of us today, but we work really well together. We try to support one another, as I'm sure, Charter 100 is, and we just love working together toward a common goal. And I think that's why our statehood work has been successful. And I think that's why Barbara Garlock's Quilts and Advocacy work has been incredibly successful. So I want to thank you for your time. I'm going to stop right here and see if there are any comments or questions.
I always have comments and questions. I just want to encourage people to look at the site that shows the quilts, because they're more than just beautiful. There is meaning behind each one. If you remember the one that had the cherry blossoms on it, and it just looked like it was sort of a tree, those are the rivers, the Anacostia, and I think it might be even the Potomac coming in, that are shown there. There's a lot of thought that went into these. Not only are they beautiful, but they're meaningful. So thank you. So because I think when I went on these sites and looked at it, I was so taken by it. And my sadness is that these were going to be auctioned off before we had a chance to see them ourselves. Are there any quilts left?
We do have examples of some quilts. Yes, we have some left. And if anyone is interested in seeing some of them, maybe at a future meeting, I can bring some over. I'm happy to share with you in person.
Thank you. Thank you. And now I'll step back and let somebody else who might have questions for you.
I did notice in the chat, someone asked, what do you really think the prognosis is for statehood?
Yes. Thank you, Paula. That's a good question. Well, DC so with DC statehood, and I'm just reading another question that is kind of related. So HR 51 has passed a couple times over the last few years. And so that's the bill in the House. And then once it passes the House, it goes to the Senate. So SR 51. And then ultimately it needs the presidential sign off. So this is something that actually does not require a constitutional amendment. There's no constitutional amendment that is required for DC to become a state. There's actually a very common thing that people think is needed, but it's not needed, because as you may remember, the map that I showed you, it shows the residential areas of DC, but then the federal district is still going to be the federal district. That's not going to be a part of the state. So right now, the goal is to really just have conversations with members of Congress, try to understand why or why not they support statehood, and then try to figure out a path forward. So in the past, there has been a nationwide survey that I think Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton's office helped spearhead, where more than 50% of Americans believe that DC should become a state and can become a state. So I think the prognosis, I would say, we're always going to feel positive, because if you have a goal and you think that it's not going to happen, then you can't make it happen. So we're always going to be practically optimistic. But the reality is that more conversations are needed in both the House and the Senate. And like I said, HR 51 has passed a couple times over the last few years, and we had a record number of co-sponsors in the Senate. So we can still get there and we can still move past it, but we really need to focus on the grassroots advocacy. And we also, of course, need partners that are on the partisan side, working with different candidates to have those conversations. So I hope that answers your question.
Hi, Yilin.
Yes. Hi, Paula.
Hi, I just wanted to ask you, how many states were represented by the quilters in their submissions?
Yeah, we had 15 states represented. 15
They-
states and DC.
They were beautiful. Being a retired auctioneer, I just wanted to comment that these quilts are so emblematic of women in the early days in the 17th, 18th, 19th century that got together to do handwork on Sundays, especially if they were in rural locations, or young girls were taught needlework, for the samplers, for their more sophisticated education. So to see this brought to bear on something with a political force was really very, very interesting and heartwarming. And some of the workmanship on those quilts was exquisite. I wish I could see them in person. So anyhow, I wanted to mention that.
Thank you so much, Paula. If we had a live auction, we would have had you as the as the auctioneer.
I've done many fundraisers for various charitable organizations over the years. So
That's wonderful.
yes.
Yeah, but no, they are these quilts. I mean, I wish all of you had seen it in person, because like Paula said, they're just truly exquisite works of art.
Yes, indeed. Are there any other questions? If not, I would like to thank Yilin for your wonderful presentation, for Babs for working out with the program committee to have this today. I want to thank Judith Hunter. You didn't hear my original introduction. I wound up having my medical appointment canceled, Judith, and then my husband just received a phone call right afterwards that his tennis partner that he played 2 hours with in the bubble yesterday tested positive for COVID. So we are in a different place right now. But Barbara Valentino and all the others down there at Restaurant Reese, I'm sure you had a fabulous meal. And I want to thank you all for making this happen today. And to our speaker, Ruth Ann, thank you for all of your last minute coordination, emails, this and that. You helped make a snow day turn into a real fun day for all of us. So thank you.
You're very welcome. There is one last question that just popped up on the chat. Is there time for it? Do you have a timeline for passing a constitutional amendment? It seems pretty hopeless with the polarization in Congress. And thank you for the presentation.
I tried to tie that into the last question, but for statehood to be achieved, it does not require a constitutional amendment.
Oh, that's
so, yep.
But it has to pass in both.
Correct.
And it is passed in the House of Representatives. And how long can it still linger before it goes to the Senate?
Well, unfortunately, we need to start over again. So we need to get it to pass, in the House again, and then it needs to pass in the Senate, and then finally presidential sign off.
Is this like every 4 years it has to be, if it doesn't pass, what kind of time does it have to?
I believe it's every congressional cycle.
Okay. Okay, so 2 years. We are on the clock then.
Okay. All right then, everyone. Well, thank you again and enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank
I don't
you.
know if I'm black, but I'm just waving to you. Yilin, thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay. Yeah, I can't see
Yeah,
you,
we're
but
all black now, but I just want you to know that I am. Imagine it. Okay, Ruth Ann, thank you for handling the Zoomy.
Oh, my pleasure. I thought this was fascinating. I used to live in DC, so it's a near and dear to my heart.
oh, and I think Babs, I think you said 2 years. It's every year, when
It's
Congress.
every year. That's, oh,
Yeah.
I thought maybe that was the term for an, okay, so we're on a tighter clock than just 2 years, yeah. Okay,
And I have an email, a chat message. There's 13 people at the restaurant. So
Oh,
okay,
wow.
it's
good.
Thank you all for
13
joining.
party souls.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Okay,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
so long.
Bye. Take care.
Bye now. Thanks again.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank
Van.
you.
Appreciate it.